Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, exploring the triumphs and tribulations that have shaped human civilization. Today, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of one of the most pivotal battles of World War II, a clash of armies that would leave an indelible mark on the landscape of Italy and the course of history, the Battle of Monte Cassino. In the early months of 1944, as the Allies continued their push into Nazi-occupied Europe, a formidable obstacle stood in their way, the Gustav Line, a fortified defensive barrier constructed by the Germans across the Italian peninsula. At its core lay the strategic stronghold of Monte Cassino, a hilltop abbey town nestled in the Liri Valley, whose commanding heights offered unparalleled views of the surrounding countryside. It was here that the fate of Italy, and indeed the war itself, would hang precariously in the balance. To understand the events that led to this fateful confrontation, we must first delve into the aftermath of the Allied invasion of Sicily in July 1943. As American and British forces successfully established a foothold on the island, the German High Command, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, began to shift its attention towards the Italian mainland. The fall of Mussolini in late July 1943 had created a power vacuum, with the new Italian government, led by King Victor Emmanuel III and Marshal Pietro Badoglio, secretly negotiating an armistice with the Allies. Meanwhile, German Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, a seasoned veteran of the North African campaign, was tasked with stabilizing the Italian front and preventing an Allied breakthrough. With his characteristic tactical acumen, Kesselring set about constructing a series of defensive lines across Italy, designed to slow the Allied advance and buy time for the German army to regroup and reassess its strategy. As the Allies pushed northwards from Salerno, where they had landed in September 1943, they encountered increasingly stiff resistance from Kesselring's forces. The terrain itself proved a formidable obstacle, with steep mountain ranges, fast-flowing rivers, and muddy valleys conspiring against the advancing armies. Despite these challenges, the Allies continued to make incremental gains, gradually closing in on the Gustav Line, that imposing barrier which stretched from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Adriatic coast. At the heart of this defensive system lay Monte Cassino, its medieval abbey perched atop a hill that rose like a titan from the surrounding landscape. The abbey itself, founded by Saint Benedict in the 6th century, had been a beacon of learning and spirituality for centuries, its stone walls bearing witness to the rise and fall of civilizations. The first battle for Monte Cassino began on January 12, 1944, when the U.S. Fifth Army, led by General Mark Clark, launched an assault on the German defenses. The initial attack was preceded by a massive aerial bombardment, with waves of Allied bombers pounding the abbey and surrounding hills, sending shockwaves through the valleys below. The Americans had hoped to catch the Germans off guard, but Kesselring's forces were well entrenched, and they put up fierce resistance. The battle raged on for days, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. On January 20, 1944, the U.S. 34th Infantry Division launched a bold attack on the abbey, but they were repelled by the German defenders, who had transformed the ancient monastery into a fortress. The Americans tried again on February 1, but their advance was halted at the base of the hill, where they were pinned down by withering machine gun fire. As the fight for Monte Cassino intensified, the Allies began to realize that the abbey was not just a strategic location, but also a powerful symbol of German determination. On February 15, 1944, the Allies launched a second assault on the monastery, this time with a massive artillery barrage that reduced the ancient structure to rubble. The bombing was so intense that it shook the very foundations of the hill, sending boulders tumbling down into the valleys below. However, the Germans had anticipated this move and had withdrawn their troops from the abbey, leaving behind only a small rear guard to harass the advancing Allies. As the dust settled, the Americans and British found themselves facing a new challenge, navigating the treacherous terrain of the bombed-out monastery, where every step seemed to trigger a new explosion or uncover a hidden mine. The Germans had transformed the surrounding hills into a labyrinth of tunnels, bunkers, and fortified caves, which they used to launch surprise attacks on the Allied troops. On February 22, 1944, The U.S. 133rd Infantry Regiment was ambushed by a group of German paratroopers who emerged from their hidden positions like ghosts, cutting down the Americans with deadly precision. The battle was fierce and chaotic, with both sides fighting for every inch of ground. As one American soldier recalled, the Germans were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They seemed to vanish into thin air, only to reappear when you least expected it. As the fight for Monte Cassino dragged on, the Allies began to suffer from exhaustion and attrition. The terrain was so difficult that even the simplest tasks became Herculean challenges. Supply lines were constantly disrupted, wounded soldiers had to be evacuated by mule or on foot, and the constant shelling and machine gun fire took a devastating toll on morale. On March 15, 1944, the Allies launched a third assault on the monastery, this time with a massive infantry attack that involved troops from the US, British, and New Zealand armies. The battle was fierce and intense, with waves of soldiers crashing against the German defenses like a relentless tide. As the third assault on the monastery raged on, the Allies finally began to gain ground, with the New Zealand Corps breaking through the German lines on March 23, 1944. The U.S. Fifth Army, now reinforced with fresh troops and supplies, pushed forward with renewed determination, slowly but surely pushing the Germans back. On May 11, 1944, the Allies launched a final assault on the German defenses, codenamed Operation Diadem, which marked a decisive turning point in the battle. The German army, exhausted and depleted, was unable to withstand a relentless pressure, and on May 18, 1944, the Allies finally breached the Gustav Line, pouring into the valleys beyond. As the Germans retreated, the Allies gave chase, pursuing them through the Liri Valley and eventually breaking out into the open countryside. The battle for Monte Cassino was finally over, but at great cost. The Allies had suffered over 55,000 casualties, while the Germans had lost an estimated 20,000 men. The monastery, once a sacred site, lay in ruins, its ancient stones scarred by the relentless bombardment. In the aftermath of the battle, the Allies continued their push northwards, eventually breaking into the Po Valley and advancing towards the Alps. The German army, battered and bruised, was unable to stem the tide, and on April 29, 1945, the last German forces in Italy surrendered. As one veteran recalled, "The war was won, but at what cost? We had lost so many good men, and the memories of Monte Cassino would haunt us for the rest of our lives." Today, the Battle of Monte Cassino is remembered as one of the bloodiest and most brutal battles of the Second World War. The monastery, rebuilt after the war, stands as a testament to the enduring power of faith and resilience, while the surrounding hills and valleys remain scarred by the memories of conflict. As historian Rick Atkinson once noted, the battle for Monte Cassino was a microcosm of the entire war, a struggle between good and evil, with the fate of civilization hanging in the balance. The legacy of the Battle of Monte Cassino continues to be felt today, serving as a reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of preserving peace. The site has become a place of pilgrimage for veterans and their families, who come to pay their respects to the fallen and reflect on the sacrifices made during the war. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.